So we will look today at a few ideas that might help you expand your generative patching. The first idea is modulating your modulation, and this can be done in a few ways. First of all, modulating the amplitude of modulation. So here I have a sine wave LFO going to the scope. You can see this is the blue trace on the scope. And a nice way to add more variation and movement is to modulate the amplitude of this sine wave with another LFO. So if I send this LFO to VCA first and then to the scope, this will be the pink trace. I can use the second LFO that I have here to modulate the amplitude of modulation, and by that create more movement and variation over time. So this will go to the CV input of the VCA. And you can see the results here on the scope with the pink trace. Of course, I can change the modulation rate also. So we get interesting results that are always changing and evolving. And of course, by using random modulation, things get even more interesting. So here I can choose a sample and hold waveform. You can see it moves here on the scope, on the VCA. Let me check, that's the rate a bit up. And you can see again the results here on the scope. Another way of doing this is by modulating the rate of modulation. So I have here another sine wave LFO, and I can modulate and change the rate of this LFO over time. So here again I have sample and hold. This will go to the volt per octave input, which is basically the frequency, the rate of the LFO. And again you can see here on the scope the results we are getting, ever changing, always evolving. So here I have a small example set. I have here the stochastic sequencer. This one has probability per step. So already we have something with variation going. It's sequencing Terraform from Valley, going through some delay and reverb. I will unmute this already. This is how it will sound like. Now I have here an LFO modulating the timbre through the wave scanning input. And you can see that this LFO is going through the VCA first. You can see the movement of the VCA here, because I'm modulating the amplitude through the CV input of the VCA with sample and hold. Actually, it should go like this. So the modulation, the timbre modulation is always changing and always evolving. Now another voice I have here is a sort of a bass. I will unmute it already. So I have here another stochastic sequencer. This one is sequencing two Bleak oscillators from Volt. They are going through a filter, the filter from Blamsoft. And first of all, what I'm doing here, I'm modulating the sound, so the pulse width and the wave of the oscillators with oct. But the amplitude of oct is being modulated by itself. So what I'm doing here, I'm sending 4 LFOs to the inputs of the VCV mixer. In this case, I'm not using it as a mixer. You can see the mix is not connected. I'm using it as 4 VCAs because each of the channels has a CV input. So I'm modulating the amplitude of those 4 LFOs with the other 4 LFOs of oct. So those are going to the inputs and those are going to the CV inputs. So again, we get modulation, we get variation. And now here I'm using an LFO. I will solo this actually so you can hear it. I'm using an LFO to modulate the cutoff point of the filter, and this LFO is being modulated, or the rate of this LFO is being modulated by sample and hold. So let's listen to this for a second. You can hear the change in frequency. Just like this. And don't forget that Pitch information is also a sort of modulation, so modulating the pitch amplitude or the sequence amplitude could also yield interesting results. So here I have the ADDR sequencer. It's an 8-step sequence, so nothing random or generative about it. But first of all, I'm modulating the rate of its clock, so I'm using an LFO to clock this sequencer, and sample and hold to modulate the rate of this clock. And if you look here on the lights on the sequencer, you can see that sometimes they are moving quicker, sometimes slower. And this is sequencing the FM operator, so I will unmute this already. Now this sequencer, the ADDR sequencer, as you can see, it's going through a VCA first, and you can see the movement of the VCA here. And this is happening before the quantizer. You can see here is the quantizer from JW. And this is important that the modulation happens before the quantizer, in case you're using one, of course, so everything stays in scale. And what I'm doing, I'm using sample and hold, in this case the one from Bog Audio, to modulate the amplitude of this sequence. So also the sequence is always evolving and always changing. Again, it's an 8-step sequence, but because I'm modulating its amplitude, it will always change. I can also solo this for a second just so we can listen to it. So you can hear, first of all, the frequency or the rate of this sequence is changing. And also the sequence itself is also changing. Altogether it will sound like this. So of course, a good way to get results quickly is using dedicated modules. So for example, marbles from Mutable Instruments, also known as the random sampler. This module exists also in hardware, and it's so easy to create interesting generative sequences and patterns with it. Or we have also the Turing machine / permutation from Grayscale. Both exist in hardware as well and are great for generating random but repeatable sequences. But we are in VCV, so we can take advantage of the beautiful sequencers in VCV. One example is this one here, the Nutrinode from Shebang. It has 4 nodes, as you can see here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. That can send signals to sorts of stars we can place just by clicking and placing them. By the way, a tip, if you want to remove one, you just drag it out of the screen and then it's deleted. So I can just add like these sorts of stars, I guess. And it has 4 channels, a channel for each node, pitch, volt per octave, and triggers that we can use. So I have here 4 identical voices. I have basically Basel from Volt going to a VCA, and I have an envelope opening this VCA. I have this 4 times, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, just the same. And I have Oct here from Instruo modulating or changing the timbres of the voices. And I have sample and hold 1, 2, 3, and 4 modulating the decay of the envelopes and also the attack of the other envelopes, just like this. So I have moving, this is something I like doing a lot, modulating the decay and attack of envelopes. So this is another tip you can try. It adds lots and lots of movement. So let's start with the pitch information. I will start sending the pitch to the volt per octave inputs of the oscillators, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we can use also the triggers to trigger the envelopes. And already I hope that we will get some sound. 3 and 4. So now we get a nice sequence, but what really makes this fun for generative sequencing is the fact that we can animate the nodes. So if I click here, move, everything starts moving. And now the sequences will always change and evolve. We can also lower the BPM, so the BPM will be how quickly the signal goes from the nodes to the stars. And I can also reduce the speed in which the nodes are moving. We can even change the octaves of the voices. So let's, for example, take the first voice an octave down and the last one an octave up. So again, we get an ever-evolving sequence, which is great if you just want to start something generative and you want quick results. Now this sequencer is also polyphonic if you are looking for something like this, and it has also an all output that will output sort of a combination of all 4 channels. So I have here another voice, I have Terraform from Valley again, going through some delay, and I have sample and hold modulating the delay times, the timbre of the voice, and again the decay time. Again, I really enjoy and I really like the sound of a voice with different decay times, sorry. So let's use the all output. Again, this will output a combination of the voices, so the pitch will go to Terraform and the triggers will go once to trigger the sample and hold, and also once to trigger Terraform. Maybe I will solo this voice. This is now Terraform. And this is all together. There are more modules from this collection from Shebang that are quite interesting. There is the Cosmosis that again you can use to create all sorts of different sequences, and the orbitones as well. Again, I can add stars here and everything is moving and evolving. So I really recommend checking this collection out. So the next tip is that clock dividers are your friends. They're great for bringing things in and out in unpredictable places, and they add lots of variation over time. So here I have a pulse LFO. LFOs are great for using as clock signals. You can see it here on the scope. This is the blue trace. And I have it also going to a clock divider. This one is from Count Modular. So if we have a look at the clock divided by 2, this is the pink trace. You can see that for every 2 pulses, we get 1 pulse out of the divider. So this is basically what a clock divider will do. But it gets more interesting when using uncommon divisions. So here I have the same LFO. Again, this is the blue trace on the scope. And I'm using a different divider. This one is from Bog Audio. It's called R-Gate. It can also multiply the clock, but we will concentrate on its divider section. So here we can divide the clock by 5, let's say. So now every 5 pulses, we get a pulse from the divider. which means that it will be harder for the listener to pinpoint when this clock will happen, especially if you use something like a division of 19 or 27, so it's harder to predict when it will happen again. But the fun really starts when using random clocks or triggers. So here I have sample and hold. Again, this is the blue trace on the scope. And sample and hold, by the way, is a great source for random clocks or triggers. So in this case, it will drive the clock divider only when it crosses a certain threshold, when the voltage goes above a certain point. And since sample and hold is more or less random, this will happen at random times. And by dividing this, we can get voices and events happening all throughout our patches without having the sense that they are repeating themselves. So here I have marbles from Mutable Instruments, also known again as the random sampler. And we get this nice jumpy and random sequence. I will unmute this and then I can show you why. So this is the sequence. You get this jumpy feel because the jitter is all the way up. So the clock is not a steady clock. It will jump everywhere, sometimes quicker, sometimes slower. Now this is sequencing two Bleak oscillators. Again, they have the same voice twice. And I'm adding some movement with sample and hold. Also here I'm modulating the decay and the attack and the decay of the envelopes. I find this really, really nice for adding movement. And I also have Oct again, adding movement to the oscillators themselves, modulating their timbre, modulating their sound. This is going through the lovely filter from Stairway, the stereo filter from Squinky Lab, sorry, it's called Stairway. And then here I have a clock divider. Again, R gate. It's set to divide by 55. And again, this is dividing this jumpy random trigger or clock from marbles. And now this division of 55 is triggering an envelope, an AD envelope set with a nice attack and decay. And this envelope will, just like it did now, will modulate, will open the cutoff of the filter. So again, because we are dividing random triggers, this will happen also randomly during our patch. But just every now and then, because it's divided by 55. So let's wait for it, that it will open the cutoff point. Let's see if it happens soon. Have a look here. Just like it did now. So this will happen again in unpredictable places and will add variation. I have here another clock divider, again R gate. Again, I'm using the same random triggers. This one is set to divide by 60. And it will send this voice, the same voice or voices, to a delay. So I have a copy of the voices from the filter going to a VCA. This one is the VCA punch from Volt. From there it's going to a delay. And the clock divider will trigger an envelope, just like before, an AD envelope, that will open this VCA. So only when the voice will actually go to the delay, so it's a sort of a parallel processing, and there's a chance that it will happen when the filter is open or when it's closed. Because again, here we have a division of 55, here we have a division of 60, so they will happen at different places, at different times. So it will always change without the feeling it repeats itself. So if I connect this to the mixer. So now it was sent and the filter was closed. You can hear, maybe next time it will send the voices to the delay when the filter is open. Let's wait for it. We can see when it's open if the light here goes up. This was the filter opening again with the divided by 55 clock. and now the VCA was open again. In this case, the filter was closed. So this adds another layer of complexity to everything. Again, in unpredictable places, unpredictable times during the patch. And you can do this with more voices. So I have here another voice again, Terraform. I'm sequencing it, in this case, with sample and hold. So it's a random sequence. It's going through a VCA to a delay. So again, only when this VCA will be opened, this voice will actually go to the delay. And I have here another clock divider. Again, it's dividing the random triggers from marbles. This one is set to a division of 63. And an envelope is opening this VCA. So only when this VCA is opened, I will unmute this voice, we will get this voice coming in. So sometimes just like now, the filter will open. Sometimes this voice or the Blick oscillators will go to a delay. And sometimes, just like now, we will get Terraform coming in. We cannot predict when. Thanks to the clock dividers, it will happen only now and then. And you can create a whole universe of things coming in and out with using clock dividers. Another interesting way to add variation in unpredictable places is by using logic. Now I know this might sound complicated, but it really isn't. And I recommend remembering 3 logic functions at first. So the AND logic, the OR logic, and the XOR logic. Let's quickly go through them and see how they work. So basically we will work with gates or triggers or even clock signals. So I have here 2 modules I can use to send out gates. Just by clicking here, you can see there is a signal going out. And I have the logic module from Bog Audio. It's called Bool in this case. So let's start with AND logic, which means that only when both incoming gates are high, a gate will come out of the AND output. So I will send the AND output to the envelope I'm using. I have here an envelope opening a VCA for my voice. In this case, it's just basal, just so we can hear what is happening. So again, the AND output will be high only when one and the other are high. So again, if I open one gate, nothing will happen. If I open only the second gate, nothing will happen. But if I open both of them, when one and the other are high, we will get our voice. So this is AND logic. The next one is OR. So when one or the other or both are high, we get a gate out of the OR output. So I will change the connection to the OR output here. So again, when one is high, or when the other is high, or when both, we will get a gate. In this case, we can listen to the voice. So basically, never mind what happens, we get something out of the OR output. Again, one, or the other, or both, we get something out of the OR output. The next one, or the last one, is XOR, which is exclusive OR. So only when one or the other is high, but not when both, unlike OR logic. So XOR, when one is open, we get our voice, or when the other is open, but not when both. Again, unlike OR logic, OR was basically all the time, 1, 2, or both of them together. But XOR, exclusive OR, is only when one or the other. One or the other, but not when both. So we can really use this and trigger events at different times. So here I have another example. I have 4 FM operators, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each one is set to play a different note. I'm using ref tone from Bog Audio just to send constant pitch. This is A, the other one is E, C, and G. I have again Oct, the lovely Oct, adding some movement through the feedback inputs of the oscillator. So again, it's just changing the timbre over time. And I'm using sample and hold to trigger those voices. Like we saw before, sample and hold is a great tool for generating random triggers or gates. So let me unmute this voice or the voices. So basically they are being triggered randomly, but the pitch is always the same, A, E, C, and G. Now we can use the first 2 triggers, so the first 2 sample and holds, to trigger or to set a third or to generate a third trigger. So here I have the same logic module we saw before from Bog Audio, and we will use the AND output to trigger the recording of Simpliciter. This is Simpliciter from Nischi. If you like sampling and samplers and whatnot, I really recommend checking this out. It's a lovely sampler. So again, we will use the AND output to trigger the recording of this module. By the way, it will play the recording back and 2 octaves down. So let's really use the AND output to the recording CV input. Let's wait for it. Now it's recording, now it's stopped. Again recording. And I'm recording the first 2 voices, 1 and 2. You can see this is the input. And again, this will only happen when both of the voices are playing. The recording will start only when both are playing, or when both are being triggered actually. And this will trigger the recording and the stop recording. So this is one use. You can use logic module. I have here another logic module. This one is from Count Modula. It's an AND logic, and I have it triggering an envelope. You can see here an AD envelope with nice attack and decay. And by the way, I love using AD envelopes, or at least this one from Nischi, because unlike a normal envelope generator, this is a function generator, which means that it's not, most of the time, it's not depending on the incoming gate. It's enough just to trigger it. So I don't care about the gate length. I just need it to be triggered. But never mind. So this is triggering the envelope. And this envelope, if I will go a bit here, you can see that it will, once it will lower the dry of the reverb, but it will increase, at the same time it will increase the decay time of the reverb, so we get a nice long tail. So if I will use all of the triggers, again this is an AND logic, I will use all of the sample and hold, all of the signals, all of the triggers from the voices here, and now only when all 4 are high, or in this case above a certain point, because this is sample and hold, this envelope will be triggered and we will get this nice reverb tail. Let's wait for it. We will see when the light here goes green, we see that it will happen. Just like it did now. So we get a nice long reverb tail just at this time, because the dry signal will go all the way down and there will be more decay for the reverb. I have here yet another logic module. This one is XOR. So again, only when one of the voices will play, but not when a few are playing, only when one or the other, but not when both. We will get a gate. So this will trigger an interesting sequencer from JW, the grid sequencer. It has also probability per step. We will look at probability in the next example. So if we again use all 4 triggers, we will get another voice playing. This one is Plets, going through the tap dancer delay from flag. So I will use all of the triggers already. We get something nice. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Another thing that might be interesting in generative patches is adding probability, so adding chance to events that might or might not happen at certain times. There are a few ways we can do this. We can use something like a Bernoulli gate. So here I have chances from mutable instruments. As you can see on the scope, it adds probability to incoming clocks and gates according to the probability control. The blue trace is our clock, and the pink trace is the result from the Bernoulli gate. So if I take the probability control all the way to the left, it means that in this case there's a 100% chance that the clock will come out of output A, and you can see this again on the scope. If I take the probability control all the way to the right, there's a 100% chance that it will come out of output B. In this case, it's not connected to the scope, so we basically get nothing. And it can be somewhere in between, let's say 50%. So now there is 50% chance that this clock will come out of output A, and 50% that it will come out of output B. So as you can see, this adds probability and chance to this clock. There is also chances from count modular, this module here. Basically, it's like having one channel of branches. But another interesting way of adding probability is with a switch. Here I have the ones from count modular. Basically, you will need a switch that has either a random running mode, so it can jump randomly between the steps, or a CV input that you can address it with CV, with random CV. So here I have an example again. I have here the VCV sequencer, the SEC3. It's sequencing the wavetable oscillator from Blamsoft. It's also sequencing the wavetable position and again the decay time of the envelope, something I really like doing. This is going through some delay with chronoblob 2. And what I'm doing, I'm sending the gate first to chances, again to add chance and probability. And this is going to the envelope. So now there is a 100% chance or 100% probability that this gate will come out of output B, but output B is not connected. So there is no chance that it will come out of output A and trigger our voice. That's why there is no sound. But if I take it all the way to the left, we will get all of the gates. And to add some variation to this 8-step sequence, we can add probability to this, again by changing the probability control. So I will take it to about 2 or 3 o'clock, something like this. So now there's movement, there's variation. And that's only an 8-step sequence playing. I have here another example, this time with switches. So I have here the 8-step switch from ML, and I have 3 different ADDR sequencers going to this switch. So there are 8 steps, but only 3, 1, 2, and 3 have actually something going in them. And again, something important is that I'm driving this switch randomly, so it's jumping randomly between the steps. So there's a chance that one of the sequences will actually go to the output and sequence our voice. In this case, I'm using again Basel, going through a VCA, and I have an envelope triggering this VCA and random voltage changing or modulating or adding movement to the timbre of this voice. So I will unmute this, and you will hear that sometimes it's playing, sometimes not. Again, according to the sequences, according to the sequential switch actually. Now this voice is going through another switch. I have here the switch 1 to 16 from Count Modular. And this switch is sending this voice to different processing. So there is a reverb, there is delay, and I'm sending it also to a delay, which is going already to a chorus, so another delay going through a chorus, and I have this chorus going to the pan from Bog Audio. So I'm modulating randomly the panning of this voice. And again, the switch is running randomly. You can see it's here jumping from between the different steps. So there's a chance that this voice will go directly to the mixer, just like we're having it now. If it's landing on step 7, there's a chance that it will go to the reverb. If it's landing on step 1, there's a chance that it will go to the delay if it's landing on step 4. And there's a chance that it will go to the delay and chorus and panning if it lands on step 11. So I will unmute those channels. So using a switch is also a nice way for adding probability and chance to your patches. Of course, this can be used in all sorts of ways. So I hope you will explore these ideas, and I hope also that you enjoyed this video. Cheers!